I think when you're brought up in like a rural kind of area, like my parents live in at the moment, the first time you ever hear of drugs is when you get given some sort of PSHE day at school. PSHE stands for Personal and Social Health Education, and I don't know if it's common across the world that schools like to do this, like elementary sort of schools, but around about 13, 14, we had these kind of, like a whole day of different classes just based around teaching kids the dangers of drugs, like the effects of their usage, all that kind of stuff. Just a like government informative program for the kids, Basic stuff, it's reasonable. And, I don't remember thinking much of it at the time. I remember just sitting through all the lectures, learning about various different types of drugs, and, I don't know the formal definition of the drug, but I looked on dictionary.com and it was something like any kind of substance which has a physiological effect on the body. It promotes some kind of change, like chemical change in the body, behavioral change, physical change, whatever. Some kind of change like that, But what always sort of fascinated me, and I'm still really fascinated by drugs in general, I'm not just talking about like illegal drugs or anything that's sort of black market sort of material. I'm talking about any sort of drug because they're just fascinating to me. And I'm not a pharmacologist, but that sort of stuff is just interesting to know in my opinion. But everyone takes drugs. Everyone in their life, I guarantee, has taken any sort of drug and probably does every day as well. Basic stuff like caffeine, alcohol, paracetamol, ibuprofen, any of that kind of stuff. Drugs. People have this sort of stigma, this mentality that all drugs are bad, not realizing that they're probably taking them every day anyway. To be honest, I think all drugs are just a matter of perspective on how they're used and, what comes out of using them. So for example, take something like heroin. Heroin, I will say to you all right now that I've never tried any sort of illegal drugs, I hope. I mean, I've got like some nootropic drugs, but I think they're legal, hopefully. But I'm talking about anything like, weed, cocaine, heroin, LSD, mushrooms, whatever. All that kind of stuff, it doesn't interest me, if I'm honest. To be honest, like, I've heard from, like, my housemate quite oftenly smokes weed, and one of my best mates at uni, who's from, like, a really conservative, like, Indian society. He's Indian slash Singaporean. He quite likes weed as well. Like, you'd think that anyone who's from that sort of background would be really against it, but he's really chill with it. And weed is like, to be honest, weed is becoming more and more common in society. Give it like 10 years and it'll probably be legal all around the world, except North Korea, who probably still think that they'll be struggling to get internet access at that point still, to be honest. But if you think about it, weed is being used more and more by people, and scientists are discovering that it's actually a useful substance. Like, they're finding ways to help use it to treat cancer. So like all the research that Marie Curie did into, like, what she discovered, polonium, curium, radium, I think. I don't know if she discovered them or just researched into them, but scientists are pretty convinced that that's going to be useful for treating cancer, and it is used in treating cancer a lot. But what if one day they randomly found some way of, like, deriving some sort of chemical from the hemp plant, or some derivation of marijuana, that actually turned out to be the cure for cancer? The number one, like, threat to the human race, cancer, is treated by what was once an illegal drug. Something that if you carry that around an airport, the police are going to arrest you, It's weird, it's all perspective. People will look down upon drugs because society tells them to look down upon them. I don't know about you guys, but as I've got older, I've become more and more cynical about society in general. That's just what society have decided. That's just other people who have no more, intellectual power or sort of right to choose than the rest of us. Yeah, they've been elected, so they get to make the laws, that's how the system works, but it's just opinions at the end of the day, backed up by some evidence, obviously. Like, when it comes to stuff like, I'll take heroin as an example. I personally don't see any use in heroin because supposedly it's used as a way to sort of calm yourself down after, like, a big night out or whatever. Give you, like, a chilled out sort of relaxed feeling, which is fair enough. But the fact that it is so expensive to obtain and so dangerous in the way that it's taken, like injecting yourself, the possibility of getting AIDS or whatever from injecting, sharing needles. And obviously, because it's illegal at the moment, it's expensive as hell. And supposedly one of the most addictive substances in the world, because if you don't take heroin, then you get this horrific, like, agitated feeling, you don't feel well, all that kind of stuff. And you commit crimes to try and get your next fix of heroin to pay for it, you know? Which, you know, after stuff like that, you can see why they'd make something illegal, which is fair enough. But then you think back to stuff like the Prohibition in the USA. I think it was the 1930s or something? I don't really know. Sometime around there. I don't know the reasoning behind it, but I think it was partially due to Protestants, like some religious motivation, but... I mean, honestly, if you tried banning... Can you imagine if they tried banning alcohol in, like, any, you know, first world country, Canada, America... UK, France. Can you imagine the uproar that would cause? And I remember, honestly, like, when I was talking about that little introduction day to, like, drugs in school, we must have been, like, 13, 14. And I remember they put us in this room with these ex-drug addicts, like, people who had been on speed or coke for, like, 20 years of their life. And they leave them in a room with us, and at the time I was like, Jesus Christ, what are you doing? Don't leave these maniacs in a room with us. You know, nice people. They didn't do anything. They were nice guys, just telling their experiences. But at the time, obviously, I was like, whoa, this is bad stuff, you know? And there was a point where the teachers went out the room so that, like, any kids who had had experiences could talk to the addicts, say like, oh, I've taken this, you know, and get some advice about it. And they didn't want to say in front of the teachers, you know? And as soon as the teachers went out, there were like 5 or 6 people just straight away put their hand up. And these are like 13-year-olds who were saying, oh yeah, I've tried crack a few times, I mean, I've been on weed for a couple of years, I've binge drink and had to been taken to hospital a couple of times. And I'm thinking, these are 13-year-olds, what kind of school do I go to? Is this like a breeding ground for the Jeremy Kyle show? Jesus Christ. But, like I said, a couple of years later, I've changed my perspective. I think drugs are absolutely fine as long as you can justify their use. Weed, a lot of people say that weed is very good for relaxing. I personally would be more inclined to try weed than any other drug, even tobacco. I've never tried tobacco because, once again, I don't see any reason for it. Weed I would try if it wasn't supposedly linked to sort of paranoia and like anxiety, that sort of stuff. Which I have enough as it is, you know, so I don't want any more of that. I've been on antidepressants for a long, long time, but if they were to get rid of effects like that, I'd be happy trying weed. It sounds like a good laugh, you know? But then you think of stuff like alcohol, which people regularly take. People will often take it for a night out. I'm gonna have to splice on another gameplay here. But people take it, like, for nights out because it makes you feel good, it makes you lose some inhibitions, it makes you sort of more chatty, more social. It's a fun drug to take, you know, and as long as you take it safely, obviously don't drive because that's a stupid idea. I've been, you know, there's never been any point where I've drank a lot and I've wanted to drive. That's just, surely inherently that's like a Darwinian natural selection thing. If you drive while you're drunk, you'll probably kill yourself and anyone else in the car. Horrible idea, horrible idea. So if you don't drink, well, don't drink and drive, obviously, right? Easy, simple, should be logical. So the bottom line is just don't abuse whatever it is you're taking. You can die off anything. You can overdose yourself on paracetamol, easily order bulk paracetamol online. Anyone can abuse drugs if they want to. So I think that where society puts sort of stigmas around drugs, or the word drug in general, I think it's misplaced, honestly, because it is all about how you use it. I mean, I've done a commentary about nootropic drugs quite recently. Pyrotoz was one I talked about. And I've got a little packet here in my hand. It's sort of like Pyrotoz, when you say to people, oh, it's a mind drug, it helps stimulate sort of cognitive abilities. People are very sort of worried about it, the idea that you could take something that's like that. Because it does sound a bit dodgy, to be honest, when you first hear about it. But it's useful stuff, like, There's no addictive qualities to it, there's no side effects as far as I can see. It's cheap, it's easy to obtain, it's very safe. I've taken quite a bit of Pyrotoz. It's not something you take regularly, you just take one if you want to do like a really big revision session or something. And actually recently I bought something called Nupept from eBay. I've got the little pack in my hand. Nupept plus choline, which is... I don't even know what choline is, but apparently it goes well with nootropics, so, you know, I just believe what I hear, you know? But this stuff, I'd say is pretty damn good. I'm actually trying some at the moment. This is like my second day trying it, and it seems to be pretty damn good. My mind's sort of thinking very clearly. I'll probably do proper, you know, reviews on it later, but at the moment I've only got good things to say about it, you know? So my overall point is, drugs can be very good for society depending on how they're used. People use caffeine to wake up every morning. People use alcohol to socialize. People use paracetamol to soothe pain. Why not find a good use for any drug? And if there's no good use for it, or, you know, the cons outweigh the pros, don't use it. Why would you want to use it? That's my point. I've basically just kind of thought beyond what the government thinks is right and wrong, and I think everyone should just decide for themselves what is right or wrong, just by looking at the evidence, looking at what is likely to happen, and just judging from their own usage how it is, like whether or not it's actually worth using. So I hope you all found this interesting. Let me know if you guys have had any sort of experiences, like big addictions with drugs or whatever, and whether or not you'd give advice to other people thinking of trying them, or, you know, wondering if it's worth continuing taking a certain drug because maybe they enjoy it but they don't know the consequences. So anyway, hope you all enjoyed, and with that being said, I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.